Now we've got the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me on.
So I want to direct your attention to this moment from Trump in Michigan just this week.
That's what's happening. They stole the FEMA money just like they stole it from a bank so they could give it to their illegal immigrants that they want to have vote for them this season.
In the aftermath of the hurricane, Harrison Walls stole money from FEMA to give it to illegal immigrants so they would vote for them. Obviously, an outrageous lie. Can I have your response to what he said, and what has this administration and FEMA been doing to help people in the aftermath of the hurricane?
Yeah, it's false. It's easy to prove that it's false. And, without getting into the campaign side of things, I can just tell you this is an administration that has been on the ground from day one, actually before day one, pre-positioning people to do what FEMA does best and what emergency responders do best, which is to help people in need. Now, the scale of the devastation here is colossal, which is exactly why it is so important that nobody be throwing around false statements or distracting people from the very real and urgent needs on the ground. I was at the FEMA Command Center, saw the work that's happening, part of which, of course, is through our department, trying to help restore roads, bridges, give people good route information so that they can get emergency vehicles in when the normal road or bridge has been washed out. All of us working together to solve problems for people and help them through this unbelievably shocking, devastating damage.
Have we not already seen what the vilification of immigrants does in the aftermath of Vance and Trump claiming that Haitians are eating dogs and cats? Like, doesn't this kind of rhetoric imperil the lives of innocent people?
Look, again and again, we have seen problems created for communities by somebody trying to use them for political advantage. And unfortunately, it has been true for hundreds of years that one of the most cynical things somebody can do is attack immigrants in order to try to score political points and to try to make literally anything into an excuse to attack immigrants. Most recently, a hurricane, but it doesn't matter what the issue is. A hurricane, housing prices, who knows? Whatever it is, all they're going to say is, here's who you should blame, here's who you should hurt. When the real answer is, here's who we need to help, and how can we get together and do it?
There's another lie that's kind of taken hold on right-wing media that all FEMA is doing is just handing people $750 and calling it a day. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, so some internet lies are completely made up. Others start with some misunderstood fact and go from there. Probably the origin of that lie is that there are funds that give people an immediate check for help, about $700 for things like food, diapers. But that doesn't mean that's all that they get. It means that it's the first most immediate source of support. And what's extremely troubling, again, is to see this benefit that's going to people, this way of helping people, somehow twisted and used for what I can only assume are political purposes. And look, none of this is helping the responders who are actually on the ground. It is extraordinary and inspiring what's happening. We are seeing first responders getting through to people even as their own communities have been impacted. We're seeing extraordinary efforts coordinating different kinds of agencies, law enforcement, firefighters, the military troops that President Biden deployed to the area to try to help. I've seen amazing examples of what's being done. And by the way, when you get away from these internet lies and some of the most extreme voices, I've been really struck by how bipartisan our work with the states and the governors has been. Called several governors of impacted states. And you would never know, listening to the call between me and a governor, which ones belong to the same political party as I did and which ones didn't. It's just about how to get stuff done. And anybody else commenting on this should be following that same spirit.
What does it say that while the administration has been swift and thorough in dealing with this hurricane, that certain Republicans have used their time not to help, but to immediately try and vilify you guys? Like, that's what they're using their political capital, their time, their resources on, while people need help.
Well, look, at any problem that Americans are facing, I think you look at it and you can either be somebody who asks, how can I help with this? Or there are people who ask, how can I help use this? Or how can I use this instead of help? Right. And the really unfortunate thing is there is so much distraction that takes away from the good work that is going on. And everybody can help. So if you're concerned about this and you're not sure what to believe, first of all, don't believe some dude on the internet. Look for actual data from FEMA, from emergency responders, from local as well as federal authorities on what's going on, and importantly, on how to help. Unfortunately, even though some of this internet politicization is relatively new, people trying to use a natural disaster for their own benefit, that's not new. People always try to exploit tragedy, but the best way through that, the best way to put that in its place, is to stay aligned with those who are actually making a positive difference on the ground. Trusted sources, whether we're talking about trusted news sources, trusted official sources at every level of government, or trusted third-party sources like the Red Cross, who everybody knows will tell you what is needed and how to help.
Don't believe some dude on the internet should be like the theme of this election, so the theme of our time right now. Another crisis that you dealt with was the port strike just this past week. So what is the update in terms of where that stands right now?
Well, thankfully, the ports are reopening as we speak. Goods are moving, and this is so important for our economy. It's even more important because of the disaster recovery, which is a point that we made to the parties, the companies, and the unions as they were working toward a deal, and something President Biden mentioned. Through an extraordinary amount of effort, lots going on in the administration, midnight meetings, pre-dawn meetings, extraordinary shuttle diplomacy by our acting Secretary of Labor, Julie Su, talking to companies and the unions, as well as folks like me and White House officials involved. The bottom line is there is now a tentative deal that represents a much deserved and long-awaited raise in wages for these workers. These are folks who have not seen the kind of wage gains that most American workers have over the last decade. And if you just think about what it was like during COVID, obviously to do a job like theirs, you can't do that online. You can't do that from home. Many of them lost their lives. And now they want to participate in this enormous economic growth that's happened and the enormous profitability of the shipping industry. This deal gives them a chance to do that. And it brings an end to the strike and gets those goods moving again, because we count on, obviously, all of those ports to get so many things that we buy at the store and that we use in our everyday lives.
While you and the Labor Secretary and the NEC Director and the President were working on resolving this, here's what Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was doing. He took to Twitter, I'm going to put this on the screen, writing that Florida's ports are being impacted by the inaction of the Biden-Harris administration, and as a result, he was deploying the Florida National Guard and the Florida State Guard. Can you talk about the contrasting strategies here that while you all were brokering an agreement, DeSantis decided to militarize the situation?
Yeah, we were focused on solving the problem. There was an enormous amount of work going on, which led to the result of the strike coming to an end. And by the way, again, this is something that shouldn't have been political. President Trump and President Biden were saying pretty much the same thing, Vice President Harris too, about the workers deserving a raise. So I was surprised by that. There wasn't enough time for that to become a major obstacle to solving the problem, but it certainly could have been. And I'm just surprised by the instinct, given how important these workers are, to want to send in soldiers. The governor has his authorities, he has his rights, but I got to say, if I were the governor of a state that had just been hit by a hurricane and I was deciding where to deploy the National Guard, I think I'd be sending them to something like a sandbag line, not to a picket line.
What are the broader implications of this obsession by Republicans, a party that frames itself as small government, to constantly try and wield the military for political purposes? From Trump attempting to send the military in to seize voting machines during the election, to now DeSantis threatening to send the military in during this port strike.
Yeah, one of the things that I always understood during my time in uniform was the principle of civilian authority over the military, but also the principle that your authorities were non-political. We weren't supposed to feel it as a unit or when we were deployed, whether the person at the top of the chain of command was a Democrat or a Republican. That's how it's supposed to be. And there is a concern here, I think, of the politicization and certainly these proposed uses for the military that have nothing to do with the military's actual mission, which is to keep the American people safe. And again, they're doing it right now as President Biden, DOD, National Guard, so many have worked to get active duty troops on the ground to help save lives and get people whose suffering is difficult to describe, to get them back to normal.
So I want to switch gears to the economy now. The jobs report was just released this past Friday. More than 250,000 jobs were added this past month, blowing past expectations. For my entire life, Republicans have beat their chest as these job creators, as the only political party that's going to create jobs. And yet we've got a Democratic administration right now that has added 16 million jobs compared to a net loss of 3 million jobs in the previous administration. What's the message to Americans who listen to these Republicans frame themselves as responsible stewards of the economy?
Well, I think, again, you got to start with the facts and the actual problems we're trying to solve. One of the problems that I think most Americans, at least where I come from in the industrial Midwest, take very seriously is the fact that we lost a lot of our manufacturing jobs. I grew up being told, we're kind of done making things in this country. The previous administration talked about that a lot, but it didn't really change. We had a manufacturing recession during the previous administration. But under this administration, we have jobs coming back to the Midwest in very traditional industries. I visited the steel plant that's making the steel for the rails that are going into the rail upgrades that we're doing across the country. I saw shipbuilding. Our department purchased a new training ship that was part of the story of how the Philadelphia shipyard came back to life. But also in newer fields like batteries and clean energy equipment and materials. A lot of UAW workers going to be getting jobs in some of the newer hybrid and EV factories going up, as well as the more traditional factories. We have this record job growth because of a policy of keeping those jobs on U.S. soil and growing them. And the rest is just talk, but talk is cheap. Results are real, and the jobs results have been extraordinary.
Well, it seems like the perfect place to leave off. Secretary Buttigieg, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Glad I got to speak with you.